Is there a reason why we're starting the webinar?
What was that?
Someone just started the webinar.
Yeah, no, we shouldn't be, right?
Oh, it just started. We were in practice mode, so now that means anyone that is logging in to
aspects, and then we are going to go ahead and start the meeting.
Is this on? It's on, okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Meredith. I work in the Office of Immigrant Affairs. We have English, Spanish, and Portuguese interpretation tonight because there will be members of our community giving testimony in all three of those languages. Unless you are trilingual and can understand all of those languages, we would love to offer you an interpretation headset so you can listen to all of the testimony. Please head over to the interpretation table and we will set you up. Thank you.
Buenas noches, bienvenidos a todos. El día de hoy vamos a tener la interpretación disponible en español, inglés y portugués. Si necesita la interpretación en español, por favor vayan a la mesa donde están los aparatos para interpretación si necesitan uno. No van a necesitar uno a menos de que sean trilingües y hablen inglés, español y portugués. Gracias.
Boa noite. Essa noite faremos uma interpretação em inglês, espanhol e português. Se precisar de interpretação, visite a mesa de interpretação para obter um fone de ouvido. Se você ver um intérprete fazendo com a mão assim, é porque tem que diminuir a fala. E se o intérprete estiver fazendo assim, deverá falar mais alto. Boa noite.
All right, Meredith, are we good with the announcements? All right, everybody, thank you for coming out tonight in person, and then thank you everyone who is virtual. We will be going through input, listening your feedback, as it relates to the rent stabilization home rule petition that the Anti-Displacement Task Force will be drafting. Sorry, just one sec. I'm hearing like an echo on the Zoom with my headset, so I just have to take it off for a sec. All right. So I'm over here in the back if you can't see me, and if you can't see me on Zoom, that's on purpose. The Anti-Displacement Task Force will be taking your input this evening. Feel free to grab any snacks over here next to the mixing booth if you're in person. Sorry if you're virtual. We have some water, we have some chips, we have some fruit to keep you guys cool from this heat. I know it's kind of hot outside. We have a registration table as you came in. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to check in. If you're here and have registered to provide comments, then you are on our list and you'll be called in the order in which you have registered. If you are here in person and you have not registered, then please do so. Take a moment to go up to the desk if you want to provide your testimony. We will be calling those individuals out at the end once all the registered folks have gone in up ahead. After we have gone through the people who are providing testimony in person and have registered, we will then go ahead and transition to our virtual team, who will be going through and calling individuals who have registered and or indicated they will be providing their comments virtually. If you originally indicated that you wanted to provide your comments virtually and are now here in person this evening, again, please let our registration table up front know so that we can update you in our list of groups of speakers. And after we have gone through all of the participants who will be providing testimony, either in person or virtually who have registered, we're gonna go ahead and go through the list of people who have not provided a registration ahead of time. And we're gonna start that in person, and then we're gonna go through the list of people virtually who did not sign up ahead of time but wanted to provide their input. After those groups have all been done, we will open it back up. If somebody wants to provide additional feedback, they can do so at that time. If anybody wants to go at that time that hasn't registered in person, we will then open it up both to people who are here in person or virtually to provide that feedback. We're asking everyone to keep their comments within 2 minutes if they could. We really want to make sure everyone gets heard tonight. We do have some extra time at the end if we have any additional speakers who want to provide additional testimony. So just because your 2 minutes are up doesn't mean that you can't provide any additional input this evening. As long as there's time, we'll be here till 9:30. So if we have any additional time, you guys can take that time up to provide us additional comments. We will be using this in conjunction with our review of the standard processes or regulations related to home rule petitions. And Nicole's actually going to go through that process a little more in detail. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Nicole, who's going to take over. I'm going to go ahead and share a slideshow for Nicole as well.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay in the Armory and on Zoom? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Eichbrett. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the co-chair of the Anti-Displacement Task Force Residential Subcommittee alongside Morena Zelaya, who's our housing policy coordinator within the city of Somerville. Thank you to members of the public who are here in person and on Zoom. This is our second listening session for the rent stabilization process. So we just wanted to take a couple minutes to make sure everyone is oriented to who the task force is and the process that we're going through. So this agenda slide just explains we'll be talking about this welcome and introduction, background information, going through the listening session itself, the process itself, and then closing and next steps. So the anti-displacement, oh, next slide, please. Yeah. The Anti-Displacement Task Force, we're a group of 15 members on the committee made up of a variety of stakeholders tasked with making recommendations to Mayor Ballantyne on a variety of anti-displacement strategies, including rent stabilization. We are a mix of City of Somerville staff, as well as tenants, advocates, homeowners, and landlords. And the purpose of these listening sessions is to gather feedback to help shape the home rule petition rent stabilization recommendations made by us, the residential committee members. Okay, so the home rule petition process. So if you're not familiar, a home rule petition is essentially local legislation filed by cities and towns in Massachusetts in order to receive state approval. Rent stabilization happens to fall under the category of things needed, powers needed by state approval for cities like Somerville. And so just to explain a bit the timeline that we're in, right now our task force is holding these community listening sessions in July. And then next month we'll be drafting recommendations for Somerville's rent stabilization home rule petition during the month of August. And then after our task force submits these recommendations to the mayor, likely in early September, one or more of members of city council will be able to submit the finalized proposal to city council for review and a vote. Once the city council votes and approves the petition, it will then be filed with the Massachusetts state legislature. And we're aiming for fall of this year. And I think most importantly, point number 4, it could take our state legislature months or possibly years to approve the home rule petition. But if passed, then the city would be authorized to enact a rent stabilization local ordinance. And with this authorization, there would be new opportunities for feedback from the public as a new proposed Somerville ordinance is drafted. And ultimately, again, any such ordinance would need passage by city council. So I think the takeaway from this is just to let everyone know that there will be numerous opportunities for public engagement. These specific listening sessions are only the beginning, and we very much look forward to staying engaged with our community as this legislative process moves forward. Okay, so on the next slide, we just wanted to share some of the key elements of a rent stabilization policy. And these are some of the policy details like we're interested in hearing from members of the public. So the first element on here is the choice of cap, or how much rent increases should be capped. The second point is the exceptions to the cap. What pass-throughs should be permitted, if any. Third, exemptions allowed. What types of properties, again, should be exempt, if any. And then on the right side, types of decontrol. What happens to rent when the tenant vacates voluntarily? And then lastly, the administration. Who controls the ordinance and how? So, this evening, we're not expecting everyone here to be able to speak on every single matter of this policy, but again, we just want to help the public understand the level of detail that the rent stabilization will be addressing, and as we continue to draft the ordinance. And then on the last slide here, these are just additional questions for the community engagement process, and policy questions that, again, we encourage you to try to respond tonight. So some of the questions here include: how should rent increases be capped? What types of expenses should be allowed to be passed through? Should a policy allow a landlord to bank rent increases? Should the base rent level reset to market rate or some other amount when there is a change in the tenancy? What types of properties should be exempt from rent stabilization? And finally, how should the rent stabilization policy be administered? So I think that's basically the last slide of substance. And we thank you for your time and your commitment to being part of this. And we look forward to hearing your stories, experiences, as well as what you'd like to see in this policy. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. We're going to be transitioning now to the testimony part of our meeting tonight. Blair behind me is going to, or next to me is going to be going through the list of individuals who registered ahead of time and have and are here in person. And when you hear your name, please make your way over to the podium, speak into the mic, and I will start your timer at 2 minutes. We also have somebody in the front who is going to be holding up a timer or a reminder when we have reached 30 seconds of your input to make sure that you're aware that your time is coming up for the 2 minutes. Again, if you wanted to provide more input, feel free to stick around. Once we have gone through everyone who has registered in person, we'll have an opportunity for people to provide more income or more input at that time. So Blair, if you would call the next person or the first person for their testimony.
Sure. The first person is Amanda Traggart.
Hello, everyone. So just to start off, I think that we should have a rent stabilization stronger than Boston's, with a rent increase capped at the rate of inflation, no more than 5% max or lower. We should have just cause eviction protections and also tenant organization protections, which have been such a boon during COVID and during these times of increased property speculation in our community. This is really important to me because last year my friend had a 30% rent increase that drove her out of her apartment in Somerville. I've only had 10% increases, but still our landlord has not done much each year to earn that 10%. And if it's hitting people like me and my friends who have good jobs, have master's degrees, this hard, and we're having this hard a time staying in the community, what does it look like for everybody else? That really scares me. And honestly, I don't want to leave Somerville, but it's feeling more and more like I have to. So that's why I believe that rent control and rent stabilization is so important for our community. Thank you.
Next up is Kevin Foster.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Foster. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a tenant at Union Square, or in Union Square. I believe that Somerville needs a home rule petition that is stronger than Boston's. We need rent increases capped at the rate of inflation, or CPI. I also believe that we need just cause eviction protections, and we also need to protect and expand tenant unions and their rights to organize. Which is a first layer of protection against the displacement that we are all experiencing in our community. Yeah, other than that, I would say, no, I think that's it. That's all I got. Sorry.
Lizzie Rutberg.
Hello, my name is Lizzie Rutberg. I'm a renter in Union Square. I'm here because I believe that Somerville needs a rent stabilization home rule petition that is stronger than Boston's, with rate increases capped at the rate of inflation with a maximum of 5% or lower. We also need just cause eviction protections and protections for tenant organizers. I can say personally, my own rent went up $50 a month this year per person. I'm in a 4-bedroom apartment. I work in a coffee shop. My roommates also have service jobs in the Union Square area. We're hanging in there for this year, but I'm actively thinking about, how many more $50 increases could we withstand before we have to go? I have a lot of friends here. I love the city. I want to live here forever. I want to be a local artist and share my work with the people who live here. And this rent stabilization would make that more possible for me and people in my situation. Thank you very much.
Bill Cavallini. Next up is Bill Cavallini.
Bill Cavallini, 33 Oak Street. I use pronouns he, him. And my cat Lucy is home fighting for a good cause. That's rent control in summer. In the effort to compose a home rule petition that you, the task force, thinks the legislature will approve, I hope you'll consider a number of things. First, you need a tenant movement that is part of a larger housing justice movement in order to preserve whatever rent stabilization is established. Tenants will not stay active if they see that the rent control that they fought for has more holes than Swiss cheese. A rent control that allows rent to go up to market rate when a tenant leaves their apartment. A rent control that lets rents go up 10% a year, no matter what the landlord's costs are. A rent control that lets landlords keep apartments vacant or allows for conversion to condos without a permit. Or a rent control that allows evictions for no cause, just because of the whim or greed of the landlord. These Swiss cheese-like holes have the impact of more than diminishing the stock of housing affordable to low and moderate income residents. It decimates tenants' determination to fight back through organizing tenant unions and mobilizing to preserve the legislation that you are establishing. Policies to prevent this have already been mentioned, but I'll repeat them. Roll back during the 6 months to year speculation period before implementation of rent control. No automatic annual rent increases.
2 minutes.
Robust just cause eviction protection, removal permit provision, no exclusions for owner-occupied buildings over 3 apartments. Thank you.
Next up is Sam Musher. Sam Musher. Okay, next on the list is Cam Morrow.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cam Morrow, and I'm he, him pronouns, and I'm a student at Tufts University. This summer, I had the privilege to work as the research and policy intern at CAS, where I spent a lot of time reading about effective rent control policies. So I'm happy to echo everyone else in saying that Somerville needs a rent control policy that's stronger than Boston's, with a max cap of 5% or lower, and that increases at the rate of inflation. It needs just cause eviction protections to prevent the displacement of vulnerable tenants. And probably most importantly, it needs vacancy control, because if you have vacancy control, that really incentivizes landlords to evict tenants informally, and that's one of the worst things that can happen. So we can't let rents increase after a tenant moves out. As for exemptions, there can be an exemption for no longer than 5 years to allow Somerville to keep building up affordable housing while still addressing the immediate crisis of displacement. And there could be an exemption for owner-occupied buildings with 3 units or more. Yeah, so I first came face to face with the housing crisis in Somerville when the Green Line extension came to Tufts last December, and I saw a group of organizers led by CAS there protesting for affordable housing. And it was, yeah, it was a really diverse group of artists, immigrants, and small families that really, I don't know, at my time here in Somerville, that's what makes Somerville Somerville. So I think we need rent control to keep those people here. I've really benefited having them as my neighbors, and it's terrible seeing them go, especially when the Green Line extension is something that they've invested their tax dollars in and their hard work in. It's not something that a landlord put money into. So yeah, with a strong rent control policy, our mayor and city councilors can protect the people of Somerville and create the equitable future that the city deserves. Thank you.
Next up is Dan Roark.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dan Roark. I live in Ball Square. I think that we should have rent control capped at the rate of inflation, 5%, and eviction, just cause eviction. Just speaking to my own experience with renting in Somerville, I spent the last few years living with 4 roommates in Davis Square. and this September wanted to move in with my fiance, and I was watching apartments were already hundreds of dollars more expensive than the year before. We were watching them listed in the morning for around $2,200, taken down and relisted for $2,500 later in the day. We saw an apartment that was $2,400 later, in which we already couldn't afford. Later in the day, the realtor reached out and said someone had offered $2,700 and wanted to know if we could go higher. So we were bidding up apartments, and that was clearly not because they had done the calculation for what they needed to make money. That was the number they had first listed, but they knew that they could take more. I think this shows that when you have a limited resource people need to survive, the free market doesn't work, and we need rent stabilization. Thank you.
Next up is Miles Meth. Miles Meth. Okay, Catherine Porter.
Hi. My name is Catherine Porter, and I'm a renter in the Tufts neighborhood of Somerville. I work in Union Square at CAS and feel grateful to both live and work within my community. Somerville's rent stabilization home rule petition is an incredible opportunity to reduce displacement in our city, so it is crucial that we do it right. As one of the most expensive areas in the Boston metropolitan area, our rent control policy must be stronger than Boston's proposed home rule petition. Firstly, I believe that Somerville's rent control policy should be capped at the rate of inflation. Real estate listing company Zumper reports that the median rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Somerville is $3,100 monthly. A 10% rent increase would mean an increase of $310 a month, or $3,720 a year. And even an increase of 5% would mean an additional $1,860 in rent a year. These small increases means less money in families' pockets for necessities, especially as families struggle to keep up with the rate of inflation alone. Additionally, without just cause eviction protections, a rent control policy is toothless. No-fault evictions are a loophole for landlords to retaliate and discriminate against tenants, creating an environment where tenants live in fear of even requesting simple repairs. Landlords should not have this much power over our lives, and a good cause eviction policy would help address this imbalance by shifting the burden to landlords to prove why they are evicting a tenant from their home. The home rule petition should also include vacancy control, so there is no incentive for landlords to displace their tenants. Lastly, I strongly believe that there should not be an exemption for small buildings. As the city of Somerville is made up of largely smaller properties, with over 57% of renters living in buildings with 4 units or less, such as the iconic triple-decker, we should not have a rent control policy where half of our renting families are excluded from the protections that all tenants deserve. Thank you to the task force and mayor for considering tenant voices tonight. I look forward to reading the proposal.
Hi, everyone. Just before we continue on, I forgot to make a quick announcement at the top of the show. Since we have interpreters here tonight, it's really helpful when we keep the speed like a normal speaking speed. And we know that that's sometimes difficult when we're giving testimony and have a lot to say. So our interpreters are going to help us with that. And they are going to make a motion with their hands going down like that, as Stephanie is modeling in front, when we need to slow down a little bit because they're having trouble keeping up. And if they can't hear you well enough, they're going to raise their hands up so you can get closer to the mic. Thank you.
Next up, we have Daniel Vernick.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I use they, them pronouns and live in Union Square. The housing crisis is the most urgent issue facing my generation. It's the most urgent fundamental issue facing our city. Take my friend, a teacher and Somerville activist, who had their rent increased by $1,000 per month last year in Davis and left Somerville. Or my friend who's an artist at a studio near Union Square, Her lease switched to monthly instead of yearly because her studio might be bought, turned into lab space or luxury apartments at any time. And of course, there's my house in Union Square. It's owned by Charles Slade, a landlord that likes to frame himself as one of the good guys. He's super friendly, a family man, backs up his decisions with what he claims is logic. He bought the house in 2014 for $480,000. 9 years later, it's nearly tripled in value to 1.3 million. Last month, he let us know that he's going to raise our rent. He didn't have to. He's a lawyer, makes $250,000 a year, and owns multiple properties in Somerville and Cambridge. When some of my housemates said that a rent increase would be financially difficult as they balance student loans, the cost of living, and teacher and nonprofit salaries, he didn't reply. Instead, we saw the apartment posted on Zillow with a $700 rent increase. My housemate recalls him saying, "I struggle to believe that raising the rent would cause a financial burden." We live in one of the wealthiest, most progressive states in the country, and the wealthiest country in the world. And yet in that moment, we were powerless. I expect that this will be our last year in the apartment, and potentially for some of us, our last year in Somerville, because we won't be able to afford the rent increase that's coming the next year. We need rent control that is real rent control. We need to ban rent increases higher than yearly inflation with a maximum 5% cap or lower. We need overall rent caps in actual dollar amounts.
2 minutes are up.
We need any policy to include both current tenants and any new ones, so landlords won't just evict their current renters and find higher income tenants. And we need to prevent banking. So I'm calling on you to address this crisis at the scale it demands by passing real rent control. People of Somerville are counting on you.
Next up, we have Marielle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marielle Merchant. I use she, her pronouns, and I live at 58 Alston Street. I've been lucky enough to live there for 5 years without significant rate increases because my out-of-town landlord didn't realize that a tea stop opened up in our backyard. So I got lucky on that one in terms of having obtuse landlords. But I'm here to advocate for rent control. Yeah, I agree that the, capping it at inflation with the 5% cap is a good way forward for the home rule petition, but it is quite frankly too little too late. We really should be talking about how we can get landlords to roll rent back because it is already too late. I'm also here because I was at a rent control rally on January 14th, 2020. There was a really large rent control movement at the time with a bill from Mike Connolly, and we packed the State House when 2 months later, you could not pack a State House because, COVID. And so I just am left thinking about how, pack the State House, there was so much energy around it 3.5 years ago. And obviously nothing was done because of the Massachusetts state legislature. And so I was thinking about if a similar policy had been implemented around that time, how much money the residents of Somerville would save. I think for some people, it would be a lot of money because I've had really high jumps since then. But even for others, with that 5% and the cap of inflation, it actually wouldn't have changed that much. So I think 5% is too much and not aggressive enough, but I think we need whatever, will make a difference. And of course we need, just eviction, just cause eviction and protections, and all the other good stuff. But it's been a long fight, and every year that something doesn't pass, things get worse and worse and worse and worse. And soon there won't be any renters to testify at these meetings. Thank you.
Next up is Malcolm Sherman Godfrey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Malcolm Sherman Godfrey. I use he, him pronouns. I am not from Somerville originally, but ever since I've lived here, I've found it to be a wonderful place full of a great diversity of kind and friendly people, all of whom deserve to be able to stay here. I was only fortunate enough to be able to move here because I'm lucky enough to be able to share an apartment with my partner, and we both have fairly high paying jobs. Unfortunately, many others are excluded from this city, including those who have lived here for large portions of their lives due to the excessively high rents the landlords are permitted to charge here and the excessive increases they're allowed to implement. To keep Somerville an accessible and welcoming city, we need strong rent control, which caps increases at or below the rate of inflation and applies to as many rentals as possible in Somerville, including the 3-story apartments like those, or converted houses like that, the one I live in. To ensure that these controls protect those already living here, they should be paired with strong good cause eviction limitations and vacancy controls to ensure that rents stay low even as tenants come and go. I hope to see changes like this take effect in this city to improve the quality of life for everyone who already lives here, and because I plan to stick around for quite a long time. Thank you.
Next up is Julia Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia. I live and work near Davis Square. I'm a big part of Somerville YIMBY. I am asking the task force to pursue a rent increase with a limit to core inflation or 5%, whichever is lower. This should also include vacancy control, so a unit cannot return to market price. My unit almost returned to market price at $3,500. I negotiated that down to $3,200, and I ate the $200 increase and cut my roommate a break at $1,500. And that was the only way to stay in my unit. It does not have laundry. There will not be laundry. It's been rough. The lack of vacancy controls creates an incentive for the landlords to evict or pressure tenants to leave so they can get back to market price. I think there should only be exceptions if the landlord owns 3 units or less, agnostic of where they live. So if they own 10 units and they live in a building, that building is under rent control. To not stunt the new housing, which Somerville YIMBY is so passionate about, we need a 5-year exemption for new buildings. And then I wanted to mention that at the last meeting, there was a lot of push about pass-through exemptions or rent banking to cover renovations and maintenance. The services are going up because there's a chicken and egg problem. The people who are providing these services are pushing those prices up to make their rent. And I think if we don't act to control rents, that's going to be a big problem. And I'm going to go fast here, but I work as a senior EE at a NIH-backed startup. I work on a spinal cord stimulator that can help a population of 25 million patients in the US manage their chronic pain. Half of these patients are using opioids right now to ease their pain. This is a brand new breakthrough device with like a significant new therapy. The rental market has caused stress for our staff around apartment rent increases and the difficulty of finding somewhat affordable apartments while managing our demanding project. This is a close-knit team in Davis Square, and it's critical that we stay focused on our milestones. And it's really difficult to onboard staff onto this project. And it hurts startups and small businesses if staff such as myself leave smaller companies with smaller budgets for larger companies that are willing to start bidding wars for our technical skills. I know I could start a bidding war with much bigger medical device companies and leave my startup. And I'm really concerned that this inflationary pressure is going to hurt these small startups with critical projects in the medical, climate, and energy domains. And rent stabilization would allow us to continue to work on these important projects. Sorry for going over.
Next up is Monica Hillman.
Hi, Monica Heilman here, and I've lived for most of my adult life in Somerville. I lived most of my adult life in Somerville on Cameron Ave, Morrison Ave, Central, and Stone Ave. My landlords were either lived in the building or had some connection to the neighborhood. And when they raised the rent, it was to cover costs that had gone up. I now live on Broadway near Magoon Square. The street is Somerville, but the building is Medford, which I didn't know when I moved in, but that's another story. Because Somerville has such dense housing stock, most of the residents in Somerville are renters. And people want to live here because it's a vibrant, diverse community. And when neighborhoods are like families, when rents go up, they get broken up and you lose that sense of connectedness. And when you stabilize rents, you stabilize the community. You also help small businesses. If businesses aren't back to the pre-COVID level, that could be because people who used to come into the restaurant or the bakery or the hair salon, that part of their income is now going to pay a rent increase. So controlling the price of essential goods is not a radical idea. Price of electricity, it is controlled. When the gas prices shot up, the government felt they had to step in. And a stable home is an essential. Not having a stable home or having the fear of losing yours is really debilitating, mentally and physically. Teachers see the effect on that in students in the classroom. And when parents have to work extra hours to make the rent, it's not good for family life. It's not good for civic engagement when people don't have the time to be involved with community activities or community organizations.
2 minutes are up.
Everyone recognizes we're in a crisis. Controlling exorbitant rents is responsible public policy.
Next up is Rodnell Remy.
Hey everybody, good evening. I am an organizer with City Life. I used to live in Somerville around 92, 93. And actually, I don't have a Somerville story. I am actually a Somerville story. I moved here, I live in Brooklyn at the time from Haiti. And there was a lot of things in Brooklyn. I couldn't survive Brooklyn. So I moved here. Somerville embraced me. I used to live off Temple Street on $300 a month, you know, a studio. I thought I made it. That was my American dream. I was very happy here until that we lost rent control. And landlord at the time told me, you're gonna have to agree for me to increase your rent. I'm gonna double your rent. It's gonna be 600 or you should go somewhere else. So of course I choose to go somewhere else. I love Somerville, so but I had to move to Dorchester. Then next year I moved from Dorchester to Hyde Park, Mattapan next year after, Rosendale next year after, Randolph. So I got pushed away because we lost rent control. So, and I'm thinking it's not just rent control. We need a box of tools that could remedy what's going on. And it's just not fair that those who have a lot, you know, can dictate everything that we do. Turn back the clock for us.
Next up is Shanae O'Hara. Ethan Dussault.
First off, super grateful for the 2-minute time limit. This is an issue that I think I could go on about for some time. My name is Ethan Dussault. I live in Ward 4, work in Ward 2, and then spend the rest of my time probably in Ward 3. The marker for how successful we are at modern life is the measurement of how much compassion is present across our acts. The marker of successful modern life is not the price of market rates. Housing as a commodity is a failure. Housing is a right, and it's time to start acting like it. If you live here, you should be able to afford to stay here. If you work here, you should be able to afford to live here. There are many constants in society that have been around way longer than any of us have been alive. When it comes to space, We need shelter, and we need places for arts, culture, and other communal needs. In recent memory, the allure of development trends, mind you, not these universal, long-standing aspects of what makes cities work, a well-rounded citizenry, for example, have crowded out the conversation about preserving and expanding what is truly important in our cities. We have lost a tremendous arts and culture footprint. We have lost affordable homes and are failing to rebuild them rapidly enough. Somerville is in danger of being renamed Sleepyville. Too many people who want to stay can't afford to, and many people who can afford to stay are threatening to leave because there's nothing interesting keeping them here. Somerville is in fact in danger of becoming a place for one type of person. What a nightmare. A rent stabilization policy which caps rent increases at the rate of inflation with a maximum of 5% or lower, along with just cause eviction provisions, is the least we can do, especially given the fact that 60% of Somerville is renters. No banking, limited exemptions. We need to explore the fullest extent of the law in this petition to maximize tenant protections. Thank you.
Next up is Joey Peters. Joey Peters. Okay. Susan Gazal Miller, who will be testifying in Portuguese.
Meu nome é Sucene, essa é minha mãe, Joane, e a gente é do Brasil. A gente mora na Union Square, eu uso ela dela, minha mãe também. E eu tô aqui para falar da minha história como imigrante de Somerville.
Mine's not working either.
In-person translation services are looked into right now. One moment.
Que bom. Eu vou começar. Meu nome é Sucene, minha mãe é Joane, a gente é do Brasil e a gente mora na Union Square. A gente usa ela dela e aqui vai minha história como imigrante, porque Somerville era chamada de Little Brasil. Quando eu fiquei grávida do Rafik, meu filho de 16 anos, eu era casada e morava em New Hampshire. E eu fiz os meus pais se mudarem de Revere para Cross Street, aqui em East Somerville, porque eu me apaixonei por Somerville à primeira vista. Eu fazia minha mãe caminhar comigo, eu com o barrigão, do Forest Park para o Winter Hill, depois que eu saía do trabalho, antes de pegar a estrada. 2 anos depois que o Rafik nasceu, os meus pais se divorciaram, eu me divorciei e eu vim morar em Somerville. E eu vim morar com a minha mãe em Somerville. É um apartamento de 2 quartos, porque é o que a gente pode pagar, ou podia pagar. Mamãe e eu dormíamos no mesmo quarto e dividíamos a mesma cama durante 5 anos. Eu tenho muito orgulho de ser independente, pagar meu aluguel e as contas sozinha para ver meu filho crescer nessa cidade, que eu amo e curto muito todos os dias. Rafik fala português, inglês e espanhol, porque eu fiz questão que ele entrasse no programa bilíngue Unidos da Capuano. Hoje ele joga futebol pelo time principal da high school, que é o Varsity Team, e é um dos melhores alunos de encanamento. Ainda falta 2 anos para ele se formar. E eu não sei se a gente vai conseguir continuar pagando o aluguel, que tem subido todo ano, sem exceção. Até durante o Covid, quiseram aumentar o aluguel em $250. Já não temos dinheiro para as férias, nem para o tratamento de dente que eu preciso, conta de poupança nem pensar. E eu trabalho há 22 anos, período integral, para o Cambridge Health Alliance, aqui em Somerville. Somerville, Central Square, Broadway, East Somerville, Assembly Square. Fala qual que você quiser, que eu já tive naquela clínica. Eu trabalho ali servindo a comunidade imigrante num hospital público. Então, como é que você explica que eu vivo com medo e eu tenho pesadelos de se algum contratempo acontecer, a gente está fora daqui? Eu vim pedir, por favor, o apoio de vocês para mudar a legislação e trazer de volta o controle de aluguel. Eu vi os meus vizinhos brasileiros saírem daqui, forçados por causa do aumento do aluguel. Eu não quero sair. Eu quero continuar sendo a sua vizinha aqui em Somerville. Obrigada.
Next up, we have Vanessa Vela, who will be testifying in Spanish. Is Vanessa here? Okay, in that case, I will go back to revisit some of the names from earlier. Sam Musher. Sam, are you here now? Okay. Miles Meth. Shanae O'Hara. Joey Peters. Okay, we will be transitioning over to the virtual testimonies.
And I just want to remind everybody, if you are here and you are a property owner and want to provide input, we're going to be making some space at the end to provide comments as well, along with anyone else who is unregistered and has, after all the people who are already here and have signed up to speak who have not previously spoken, and everyone who is virtual who has arrived and not registered ahead of time as well. We will throw it over to Hanale now. Before we do that though, I just want to provide the Zoom chat an ability to be able to talk to their audience to make sure that they catch everybody who has arrived and not registered. So I'm going to give about 5 minutes to our Zoom chat. We'll listen in on that here while they go ahead and talk to the Zoom audience and make sure that there isn't anybody in the audience that is virtually attending but would like an opportunity to sign up to speak. So at this time, we'll be going ahead and muting our microphones here, but we'll be able to listen in to the Zoom audio virtually.
Oh, okay, so we're going to be getting started with the virtual participants now, starting with Susan. Susan, you should be able to talk now. Susan, would you like to share your testimony?
Yes, I'm having tech difficulties.
Oh no.
All right, it seems to be echoing and I can't see myself, but so good evening, everyone. My name is Susan Hagel. I'm a housing attorney at Cambridge and Somerville Legal Services. And I'm here in support of a rent control home rule amendment. I did submit written testimony and I just wanted to highlight some of my comments. I think it's really important that it covers rent increases, and you heard a lot of testimony about CPI or 5%, and I would urge the task force to look at something like the Social Security cost of living adjustment, the COLA. I don't think people's wages necessarily increase, at the rate of inflation, and I think 5% is often too high. When the rents are already high of $3,000, 5% is another $150 per month. So I would urge you to look at other easily found indexes for rent increases. I do think it's critical that it also include good cause eviction, that right now, if you don't have a lease, anybody can be evicted for no reason or any reason. If you do have a lease, it can simply be not renewed, or they could be offered at a higher rent, and if you don't accept it, you're can be evicted. So it's a very important component of any kind of rent stabilization to have good cause for eviction. And I would suggest that it be limited to tenant fault. And I suggested some language to the task force, or if an owner or the owner's immediate family wants to occupy a unit, that it then be, that could be good cause. As mentioned earlier, I think it's also important, the third component is to have removal from the rental market. You don't want, based on my experience a long time ago with Cambridge, owners would simply leave units vacant. And that certainly does not help with the housing crisis. So any kind of removal, whether it be by leaving units vacant or demolition or conversion to some non-housing use, should be prohibited. And finally, I do think owner occupied 2s and 3s should be exempt. And I think tenants with Section 8 tenant-based vouchers should be exempt only if the rent is limited to the payment standard and the minus the utility allowance. That unlike earlier, there is no cap on Section 8 rents. I think this would also be an incentive for landlords in Somerville to rent to voucher holders. And finally, oops, I have 15 seconds. Wanted to suggest to the board to consider looking at the condo board as the rent control board. It has 2 homeowners and 2 tenants. And if you were to add a city employee as a tiebreaker, you have an existing board that you could build upon for implementing some of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next, we have William Lawton. You should be able to speak at this point, William.
All right, thank you. My name is William Lawton, and I live in West Somerville in Ward 7. I also, like Susan, assist Somerville tenants facing eviction through my work as a housing attorney. My office is called De Novo. I believe that Somerville needs a rent stabilization policy stronger than the one proposed by Boston. While I echo what Susan said about different ways to cap it, it certainly should be no higher than 5% each year. And I also echo the need to have just cause eviction protections because the cost and disruption of lease non-renewals or no cause evictions have severe negative repercussions on educational outcomes for children, health outcomes for entire families, and job security. Not to mention that our neighborhoods suffer when neighbors cannot be certain that they'll be able to afford to live in the same place they do year on, year out. The amount of money needed to move when facing lease non-renewal or no cause eviction, first, last security brokers is an absurd amount that extracts wealth out of tenant families and often out of our city. A current hands-off approach to the rental market is a policy choice that redistributes wealth from those who have next to nothing to those who already have so much. Real estate developers and people who sell houses love to say that buying a home is buying rent control for yourself, but Somerville residents cannot expect to purchase a home in Somerville unless they are extremely wealthy. The task force and the mayor's administration have the chance to provide stability to those renters, and they should take it. The petition Somerville submits should cover all existing rental units with a limited exception for new construction or new converts from non-residential to residential. A limited exception for owner-occupied 2 to 3 unit buildings also makes sense to me. Rent control should be tied to the unit and not the tenant because the rental market has suffered such a catastrophic market failure that we cannot allow market forces to take over simply because a tenant moved. Not to mention that if control was tied to the tenant, landlords would be incentivized to harass them out. Rent control or rent stabilization will not solve our eviction crisis, but a carefully tailored policy that eliminates loopholes for landlords and developers would provide a balm to many tenants in Somerville who have suffered and will continue to suffer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Amanda Bristow. Amanda, you should be able to speak.
Hello, my name is Amanda Bristow, and I am a renter in Ward 2, Somerville, and I've been hanging on living here in Somerville for 13 years. I believe that Somerville needs a rent stabilization policy by way of home rule petition that is stronger than Boston's, with rent increases capped at 3% maximum or increases or lower, and just cause eviction protections. I also strongly feel the stabilized rent should be attached to the unit and that tenants' rights to organize should be fiercely protected. I had my rent increase last year by over 35%, and this year increased again by another $100. This isn't maintenance, this isn't property taxes or water, this is pure greed. And this is the reason why so many amazing, valuable, diverse members of our Somerville community are being driven out of our city. Bonds of friendship and neighborliness, progress towards building constructive, caring communities are being broken and thwarted every day as another one of us sadly cannot continue to afford to live here. Please do everything in your power to advance this policy forward, and thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Next up, we have Jen Harrington. Jen, you should be able to speak.
Hi, my name's Jen Harrington, she, her. I've been a renter in the same Ward 3 apartment for over 20 years. I've had tremendous luck to have a fantastic landlord, so I can call the place I rent a home, a rare story. Somerville needs a rent stabilization policy that is stronger than Boston's, with rent increases capped at the rate of inflation, that has a maximum 3% cap or lower on rent increases, that includes just cause eviction protections and includes vacancy controls. Landlords have had almost 30 years to show what they can do without rent control. With insane rent spikes, we've seen our community members forced to leave Somerville. We've seen our city become far less diverse. We've seen our cultural, artistic, and volunteer communities flee. We've seen people struggle and sacrifice to stay here. We've seen people who work here have to increase commuting hours because they can't afford to live here, or the next town over, or the next town over that. We've seen more and more property owners who do not live here make a huge profit that they disperse elsewhere. We've seen more than understandable unrest and distress as our city and state fail to protect citizens. In 3 decades, the majority of property owners have worked to make our communities work just for them. During that time, they proved that the imbalances they've created just don't work. Landlords, just like any other industry, require regulation in order to protect community health. Somerville is long overdue at establishing a rent stabilization policy. It needs to start becoming a champion for the people. It needs to recognize that housing is a right. It needs to become a place that will empower renters to call Somerville a home. Thank you for listening, and thanks to everyone tonight who made their voices heard.
Thank you. Next is Samantha Wolf. You should have permission to speak.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Samantha Wolf, she, her, and I am a renter on Broadway in East Arlington. I have also worked with hundreds of Somerville renters over the past 2 years as a community organizer for CAS. I'm here to urge the task force to adopt a rent stabilization policy that is stronger than Boston's. First, the vast majority of renters I work with can barely afford an annual rent increase of 2%. So if we actually want to stop the displacement of our low-income neighbors from Somerville, particularly communities of color and immigrant communities, then we need to not only cap increases at 2%, but also forbid rent banking. And honestly, as Marielle stated earlier, roll back rents. We also need vacancy controls in this home petition. Additionally, Somerville renters can no longer weather the extreme uncertainty of renting in a city that does not have just cause eviction protections. Renting individuals and families are only so resilient. I grew up in a single parent household myself. We always rented my whole life, and there was always the anxiety of not knowing how much your rent is going to go up every year, not knowing if you're going to have to pack everything up and move your whole life somewhere else. And that fear to even bring up maintenance concerns because of how easy it'd be for your landlord to not renew and chalk it up to something else. This has a real impact on renters' health and on children's development, as William mentioned earlier, and that ripples through the community. And lastly, we need to be extremely careful with any exemptions. A third of housing in Somerville is owner occupied, and we know that most of those homes are not single family. So exempting all of those multifamily buildings from rent stabilization means that thousands of tenants will remain unprotected and at risk of displacement from their homes. So in my opinion, anything less than the protections I've laid out is like a slap in the face to all the renters who can barely afford to live in Somerville anymore. Thank you so much for listening and taking this into consideration.
Thank you. Next is Allie. Allie, you should have permission to talk.
Hello, my name is Allie Fry. I live in Ward 2, and I'm a Somerville renter. Somerville needs a rent stabilization policy that is much stronger than Boston's, and I want to thank all of the other renters and neighbors who've come out and spoken, and I echo their calls for something stronger than Boston. And I do agree that we need to look at cost of living instead of at the 5% cap on rent increases or inflation. I am a public servant. I'm a public librarian. I went to graduate school to do that job, and my rent increased this year by 3%. And I'm not certain that that's going to be tenable for much longer for me. I received a cost of living rate from my job that allows me to take home an extra $24 each month. And I'm a working professional. So I do think we need to look at other measures, and I think that this is just not enough. I know we've been told to ask for things that are realistic, but frankly, how we are living right now in fear of our landlords, who mine doesn't even live in the state or contribute to our community, that's not realistic for us to be living in fear. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Lenny. Lenny, you should be able to talk.
Hi, my name is Lenny Somerville. I am a renter in Ward 3 in Somerville. I believe that Somerville needs a rent stabilization policy that is stronger than Boston's, with rent increases capped at the rate of inflation with a maximum 5% cap on rent increases, preferably lower, and just cause eviction protections, as well as protections for tenants' right to organize and vacancy protections. My wife and I have lived in Somerville for the past 7 years. We consider this our home and our community. However, this year, our rent went up by 20%. Our landlord has expressed the intention to raise it a comparable amount next year. We can't absorb another rent increase of this magnitude, and we worry that we will have to move to a different city to find something affordable. We are both working professionals with good salaries. We had been hoping to stay in this apartment until we could transition from renters to homeowners, but it's impossible to build up the necessary savings when our housing costs are going up so much so fast. If we can't afford to live here, I'm wondering who can. I'm tired of losing friends and neighbors as they are forced to move as far out as Marlborough, Canton, and Beverly just to be able to afford rent. This has always been a vibrant, creative, and diverse city, and it deserves much better than becoming a bedroom community for the wealthy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next is Stephanie or Sam. You should have permission to talk.
Hey everybody, I'm Sam. I use they, them pronouns. I'm gonna try to go slow for our interpreters. So everything we love about Somerville will vanish without a strong rent stabilization policy. The artists, the diversity, the deeply connected immigrant community, and unique local businesses will be pushed out. There will be no good bands at Porch Fest, if Porch Fest even still exists. My partner and I both work full-time jobs to afford 450 square feet of space, and we're still rent burdened. We should be alarmed at the fact that a dual income household anywhere has to struggle for a humble one-bedroom. We love this community and care deeply about our neighbors. My partner invests in this community, working to provide early childhood education resources to low-income families. He also plays Porch Fest every year to a very enthusiastic crowd. These are the types of people that Somerville will lose, is losing, has lost without rent control. I work with low-income tenants in Greater Boston and spend much of my day worrying about their housing stability. I come home to worry about my own. Our new landlord has increased our rent 25% within the last 2 years. We've lost multiple neighbors to increases as high as 33% in a single year. Rent control is the only mechanism that will not just save my housing, but buffer the fabric of our communities from the razor-sharp greed of developers and property owners who only see Somerville as a commodity to be plundered. Thank you.
Thank you. And a message from our interpreters is to please remember to speak slowly and be in front of your microphone if possible for the best audio quality. Next up is Diego, who is having Portuguese translation. I do not see Diego in the attendees. Please quickly comment in the chat if you are here.
Yeah, okay.
Right. I'm going to move on to the next person. Diego, if you're present, we'll come back to you at the end of the registered virtual speakers. Next is Gabrielle. You should have permission to speak.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Renee. I'm a community organizer with City Life. I strongly believe that Somerville needs a rent stabilization policy, home rule petition that is stronger than Boston's, with rent increases capped at the rate of inflation, CPI, with a maximum 5% cap on rent increases or lower, and just cause eviction. And I also believe it's very important to have tenant union protection, tenant association protection, as well as Section 8 tenants. They should not be charged more than the payment standard on a yearly basis. I just want to say that I am no longer a resident of Somerville, but I lived there when I was a high school student, and my family was displaced out of Somerville because of high rent increases. We ended up in Medford, and then finally my mother had the wherewithal and the opportunity to purchase a home in Malden. But I would say that one of the things that I remember vividly was when we were forced out of Somerville, I was still a junior in high school, and I stayed at the high school. So many of the students who are being displaced out of Somerville because of friendships, because of community, because of the fact that nobody wants to have to reinvent themselves over and over again and trying to build new community, they stay. So they're using the resources of the community, but they live someplace else. I know I've gone to speak in Malden, and I hear teachers saying the same thing. Kids are moving out of the city, being displaced, and they're staying in the school system. So please, I'm asking elected officials and those who are in power to be smart enough to stabilize our communities. We deserve to have communities. We deserve to have places where we know our neighbors, and we deserve to have a community that we can afford, that is affordable and habitable. Yes, they can make it affordable and habitable for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shane. You should be able to speak.
Hi, I'm Shane Woolley. I live on Albion Street in Somerville, although right now I'm on the train, so I might cut out, and if that's the case, sorry about that. I just wanted to say, it's kind of sad we have to have this debate. Somerville is one of the municipalities that sorry about that, but voted to keep rent control in 1994. So it's just the fact that it was struck down by suburban voters is kind of a shame, although I'm glad this conversation is finally happening. It's crucial to keep those rent increases capped at the rate of inflation, or even better, as Susan Hagel pointed out, maybe at the COLA living index. I think that's a great idea. Just cause eviction is super important. Vacancy controls are super important. And I think probably about to lose reception, but an oversight body for this is also crucial to make sure it gets enforced. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Next is Corey. Corey, you should have permission to talk.
Hi, my name is Corey Donahue. I'm a renter in Somerville, like 2/3 of the residents in Somerville.
My wife and I are renting in Inman Square. Would love to be able to continue living in Somerville. Buying is already off the table, and with significant rent increases, it would be difficult for us to live here. I think that Somerville needs a strong rent control policy, significantly stronger than what Boston has passed. With the affordability crisis that we're seeing in Somerville, the displacement of those that can't afford to continue to live here will significantly change the community, significantly push out people of color, lower income people, and benefit real estate interests and developers. And so an adequate rent control policy is just the beginning, but could hopefully stop the bleeding. And I think it should include provisions that limit rent increases to be no higher than inflation, as someone on Zoom shared earlier. This could be aligned with Social Security's COLA cost of living adjustments. Overall rent caps that include actual dollar amounts for how much those are able to charge in rentals. Vacancy controls, so that landlords aren't just incentivized to evict renters to find higher income tenants, so that rent control policies can extend between unit's current tenants and any new ones. Tenant protections that include strong just cause eviction provisions without any loopholes. And lastly, limited, if any, exemptions. So no exemptions for new or small buildings in any kind of rent control policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Next, we have Ariel. Ariel, I don't see you in the attendee list. Please mention something in the chat if you are here and using a different Zoom account, or show up under a different name. We also next have Marquesta, who is not showing up in the attendee list as well. Again, if we miss your name, we will come back to you at the very end of the registered speakers. So we are not going to miss you. The next person after this is Nicole. Nicole, you should have permission to talk.
Hi, my name is Nicole Joseph, and I'm a tenant in Winter Hill. I live at 30 Evergreen and used to live on Porter Street. I believe that Somerville needs a rent stabilization policy that is stronger than Boston's, with rent not increasing, no exemptions or exceptions, vacancy controls, and just cause eviction protections. I'm part of the Hospitality Workers Union, and the shirt I'm wearing right now says one job should be enough. I work hard to have a good union job, but even with those good jobs, Somerville is too expensive. The personal reason why I'm calling for these policies to be included is because during my time on Porter Street especially, there were countless times when our space was uninhabitable. It did not feel safe to live there at all. But during that time, I felt scared to demand basic living standards because I was afraid of retaliation through rent hikes, and feeling like there was no clear way to stay in the city if our rent was raised by our landlord. And we actually did move to Medford for a while, and luckily I'm back in Somerville now. So yeah, thank you for your time. And I think that there's a lot of people that mentioned that there's a lot of things that need to change, and it feels kind of too late, honestly, but I think rent rollbacks would be a great idea. And I think that Somerville should be a place where everyone's actually welcome here, regardless of the amount of money in their savings accounts. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next, we have Dan. Dan, you should be able to talk. Next, we have Jenna. Jenna, you should be able to talk.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Hi, my name is Jenna. I use she, her pronouns, and I rent in Union Square. My wife and I have lived in our current apartment here since 2019. When we moved in, our landlords lived above us and only raised the rent when water prices increased. We recently changed to a new landlord who increased the rent by 20% this summer because luxury condos and commercial landlords have driven up the average rent by over $1,000 in just under 4 years. If we had to move next year, we would not be able to stay in Somerville because of those high prices. We go to the farmer's market every week. We've been able to get to know our neighbors. We've adopted a dog. I have even thought about getting involved in local government, but seeing a 2 or a 3 year term is kind of scary because I don't know if we're even going to be here for the next 2 or 3 years, even though I have a quote, good salary. Rent control means that we could continue to think about building our lives here. Rent control would mean we don't have to worry that our friends, our neighbors, and our diverse community is going to keep getting pushed out. Somerville absolutely needs a policy that is stronger than Boston's. I am also asking that rent increases be capped at the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is lower, including just cause eviction protections, a ban on no-fault evictions, and vacancy controls. This is incredibly important in order to set up a proper incentive system that doesn't leave loopholes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Steve H. Steve H., you should be able to speak.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. This is Steve. I'm a property owner and landlord in Ward 5, and I'm here to say that I am wholeheartedly in favor of rent control. And I yield the rest of my time. Thank you, everyone else who showed up.
Can the Portuguese interpreter please get back into the Portuguese channel, please? The Portuguese interpreter on the Zoom is, can you get into the Portuguese channel instead of the English?
Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Courtney. I'm assuming we're good to proceed.
Yes.
Next is Vivian. Vivian, I am not seeing you in the attendee list at this time, so we are going to move on. If you are here, please comment and we will come back to you. So, next, we have Vanessa, who is using Spanish interpretation.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Vanessa y yo soy una líder comunitaria de Somerville. También tengo viviendo en Somerville un poco más de 18 años. Mi hijo se acaba de graduar de la High School de Somerville. Y estoy aquí porque quiero hablar de la necesidad de un control de renta que se necesita en Somerville y que necesitamos que sea menos del 5%, porque la verdad que la gente ya no puede con esta gran carga que es los nuevos dueños de los buildings están aprovechándose de la necesidad de vivienda y las personas se están estresando. Nosotros, en mi caso personal, mi familia ha pasado por la necesidad de tener que pelear por la vivienda, por quedarnos en Somerville, en nuestro hogar, el hogar que hemos creado. Y ha sido un estrés inmenso en mi hijo, en mi mamá, en la salud de todos nosotros. Y pienso que todos los hijos del inmigrante, todos los hijos de las madres solteras, tienen los mismos derechos que los hijos de las personas que tienen dinero a tener un hogar seguro. Por eso estamos peleando y luchando con CAS para que esto suceda, para lograr el sueño que tenemos todos de lograr que el hogar sea un derecho humano. Y vamos a hacer lo que sea necesario hasta cumplir ese sueño. Y le pedimos a todos los que puedan hacer esto posible de lograr un control de renta. Gracias.
Thank you. Next, we have Kate or Catherine. You should be able to speak.
Hi, my name is Catherine Leach, and I live in Gilman Square. My partner and I moved to Somerville in 2019 and have lived in the same apartment since then. We're lucky to have landlords who only manage our unit and the one upstairs, who've been responsive and who've only increased our rent once since we moved in. However, I know this is not the norm for many of our neighbors. Having stable, affordable housing should be a human right, but in our current system, landlords hold a lot of power over tenants. Our downstairs neighbors were PhD students, and their landlord decided to sell their apartment this spring, only 6 months into their 2-year lease. They tried to ensure stability by signing a long-term lease, but instead were forced to find a new apartment outside of the normal June-September cycle, and were uprooted in the middle of their semesters. I know many other families are being forced out of Somerville because of rising rents, and many need to choose whether to stay and pay more or eat the cost of moving potentially out of Somerville. I think we need to make it much harder to displace tenants. I support a rent control home rule petition stronger than Boston's, with dollar amount caps on rent, forbidding rent increases higher than inflation, potentially even lower than inflation, tenant protections, vacancy controls, and no exemptions for owner-occupied buildings. We are still waiting to receive our lease for September, and I will be holding my breath until it comes, hoping that our landlords won't significantly increase our rent, refuse to renew, or sell to one of the many developers drooling at the prospect of leveling our entire block and building luxury apartments in its place. I hope you do what you need to do to make sure that this policy has the teeth that it needs to protect people and allow us to stay in our homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Next, we have Sam M. You are able to speak.
Hello. My name is Sam Musher. I use they and she pronouns, and I currently live in Ward 1. I believe that Somerville needs a rent stabilization policy with rent increases capped as low as possible, no exemptions for owner-occupied buildings. We need rents not to reset to market rate when tenants leave, and somehow we need to roll back rents before we become San Francisco. And here's why. So I've lived in Somerville for my whole adult life. For most of that time, I rented affordably, which is how I was eventually able to buy a home. So I am a homeowner, and tonight is not my night. But I want to speak as a coordinator with Mamas, Mutual Aid, Medford, and Somerville. We hear from people in desperate need of help with their rent all the time. These are working people who also love our city and contribute to our community. They should be able to make a home here without having to ask a group of neighbors to supplement their rent, which we unfortunately cannot afford to do for everyone. I am also a public school educator, so I know that students who stay in the same school are more likely to get the services they need when teachers know them and their families know how the system works. When we put families in the position of having to move every year to chase affordable rents, we're putting kids' education at risk. I fell deeply in love with Somerville 22 years ago and made it my mission to stay. Because of total accidents of age and privilege, I have been able to do so when those who came after me can't. I want everyone who loves this city to be able to stay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. Next, I'm going to go through the list of people who registered and did not speak earlier. Diego, Ariel, Marquesta, and Vivian. If you are here, please say something in the chat. Also, we are only collecting testimony via email, not via the Zoom chat. Please submit your testimony to adtf@somervillema.gov if you would like to submit written testimony tonight. I am not seeing anything in the chat at present, so we are going to transition back to in-person for people who did not register ahead of time. After this, people who are on the Zoom and did not register ahead of time will have a chance to speak.
All right, testing. Can you guys hear me in the chat? If you can give me a thumbs up if you hear me on Zoom. Yep, great, perfect. Okay, 1 sec. All right, so we're going to transition back to the in-house registered, or I'm sorry, in-person attendants or attendees who are not previously registered. We're going to go ahead and transition to that list, and then we're going to go back over to Zoom for virtual participants who were not registered, and then we will come back in-house or virtual for those who want to provide additional comments or for property owners who want to provide their comments this evening as well. So we'll go ahead and transfer, or I'll go ahead and let Blair call off the first person on the list.
You're fine. The first person on the list is Ian McGregor. Ian, are you here? Okay, next up is Nate Gerke. Okay, Jarrett Moultrie Weathers.
Try to not go over. I know Daniel, I don't want him holding up that 30 seconds at me. I think that Somerville needs and should adopt a rent stabilization policy that is stronger than Boston. And there needs to be a good case, a good cause for eviction. And it needs to have language that is not left up for interpretation. So it has to have language where an owner can't say, well, I feel this is good cause. I also believe that the rent should not reset to market rate, and that vacancy control should also be available, should also exist. I am a tenant who recently had my building sold. The building sold, we all knew it was gonna happen. The people bought the building, they came in really nice, smiling at us and everything, telling my son, oh, you're such a pleasant person. Oh, you know, you're such a good mom. And the next thing we know, it was, bye, we don't want you anymore. I'm lucky because I am fully supported. I am supported by Cambridge and Somerville Legal Services. I'm supported by CAST. These are organizations where I've received help in the past, where I actually volunteer at, oh, wow, I actually volunteer at and know people, and I appreciate it. And I am here to advocate for strong language, so there is nothing left up for interpretation. Thank you.
Next up is Cindy Weisbart.
Hi, I'm Sam Musher. My name's Cindy Weisbart. I'm a teacher. I'm a documentary photographer, and I'm an owner-occupying landlord in a 3-family house in Ward 4. I moved into a moderate rate rental apartment where I still live 17 years later, and I feel like it's the legacy of my building to carry this forward. I am working on a project right now called Owner Occupied, where I'm interviewing small landlords, small owner occupying landlords in the Somerville area who rent apartments in their building for moderate rents. and the Somerville Arts Council is supporting this work. There's a lot of them. When I started teaching economics, I saw how price ceilings such as rent control can take rental units off the market. And this was a disappointing shock to my sensibility as a strong rent control advocate. Last year in an interview with a Somerville small landlord, I heard a tremendous recommendation, and that's what I came to testify about tonight. A luxury tax on the extremely expensive rentals in Somerville and beyond, and for local government to use this revenue to subsidize either tenants or landlords to be able to offer affordable rents. I urge the city to consider this use of public funds to mitigate a problem of public welfare. It is government responsibility and a human right to have safe and stable housing.
Okay, Joey, I know you just got here, but are you ready to go up? It's okay if not. Awesome, Joey Peters.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. I'm Joey Peters. I've lived in East Somerville for about 2 years. Last year, my landlord raised the rent 20%, and this year he's looking to raise it around 13%. And it looks like he's going to get it, and it looks like I'm going to get displaced. So I'm kind of not happy. Yeah, no, it's absolutely mystifying, very frustrating. And you know, we may have quote unquote affordable housing units opening in what was it, Union Square, but every single one of those is like more than I pay now. And so like, it just seems like that there's a lack of solutions. And like, one thing that we really do have to keep in mind is that the state legislature is absolutely not going to just like debate and allow rent stabilization across like any like city charter. Like I know Boston did it. I know we're trying to, well, we're investigating that, but it just seems extremely unlikely that that is actually going to happen. So the thing that we should actually be like organizing for and trying to, advocating for is like the most absolute maximalist possible version of rent stabilization. I mean, I've seen a lot of people talking about restricting rent increases to inflation up to 5%. And that's just ridiculous. Like, if you're gonna go, you might as well make this a statement, like no rent increases, or demand like rent increases of negative inflation. Thank you.
Next up is Naima Saeed.
Hello, my name is Naima Saeed. I've been living in Somerville since 2015. For 6 years, I was a renter. Then it was, lucky enough to, have a partner who was a homeowner. And I'm here to testify as a community member who worked as a teacher at Somerville High School for the past 7 years. I'm here to advocate for rent stabilization that includes vacancy controls and just cause eviction. Over the 7 years working at Somerville High School, I've seen many coworkers who are educators in our schools, and they had to move out of Somerville because with the teacher income, they cannot afford to rent here. When I started teaching Somerville High School in 2015, my income was $37K, and I had to look for months to find a room that I can afford. And today, the educators who are educating our students cannot live in our community. The rent they got in 2015 just doesn't exist anymore. I've also, by the way, I taught French at Somerville High School. So we had a lot of families, they have a lot of Haitian families, they have a lot of families from some parts of Africa where French is spoken. These are, very brilliant students who took French for 3-4 years so they can take an AP class and get 3 college credits. And after we went back in person, my student body completely changed. So many of the families I worked with over the years had to move out of Somerville. Some of them in 2021, 2022, I had many seniors who had to commute from other cities to finish their school year. Because when you're already enrolled in the district as a senior, you're allowed to finish the school year. And that's just unjust. It was just devastating, to see that. Just to finish, I will say that educators, families, and friends, way too many people are leaving our city because we do not have enough affordable housing. We need rent stabilization, and we need it now.
Next up is Bert Faulkner.
Greetings. My name is Bert Faulkner. I am a landlord in Somerville. I suppose that would make me the enemy in some small sense. However, that is not a position I envy being in, and I don't treat my tenants as such. And when I say that about myself, I speak for most of the fellow landlords I know. Are there rotten, no good SOBs in my business? You bet. They are in every business. Okay, the trick is to look around, go shopping. You can find good landlords in good apartments. You can find people who will give you reasonable rent increases. There is no such thing as an unnecessary eviction unless you have a landlord who is going to come along and say, your rent's going up $1,000, which is unconscionable and terrible. But there is no reason a landlord would evict someone unless they're just not paying, or unless they're raising hell and tearing the apartment apart and disturbing their neighbors. So that is actually a rarity, like I say, unless the rent goes up ridiculously. A few speakers back, someone said in the last 30 years, because of the landlords, Somerville has taken a big dive and it's not quite as the place it used to be. I don't know what Somerville they're talking about, but I've lived in Somerville the last 30 years. I've seen it flourish. It's a wonderful community of business people, of artists of all types. The parties in Davis Square where they close the whole place down, it's great. Porch Fest is wonderful. We live in one of the most desirable places in the world. We have a great community with arts, restaurants, good buildings, good properties, because the landlords have not had rent control. We have been able to put the money back into our buildings. Now, I can only speak for myself when I say this, but I know most of my colleagues, when we get enough money to do something, it goes back into the building. As long as we can make a living, and a decent living, I won't lie to you, but it takes a long time. It takes years and years for us to build up. I'm sorry, that's it. But anyway, thank you. And there are good landlords out there, and Somerville is a good place. And if you shop around, you can find them. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes the list of individuals who are here in person but have not registered ahead of time. We're going to go ahead and throw it over to the Zoom now, where we will commence the list of individuals who are virtual but have not registered ahead of time. So I'm going to go ahead and cut our feet here to the microphones, and Hanale is going to pick it up on the Zoom side. Dan, yeah.
Okay, hello again. We're going to be going through the list of people who have commented in the chat that they would like to speak. If you would still like to speak, there is still time to comment in the chat. We are going to be starting with Mauricio, who is unmuted and can talk.
Aló, sí, buenas tardes. Buenas tardes, City de Somerville. Sí, definitivamente. Soy Mauricio, vivo en Somerville como por 20 años y pues definitivamente el límite de la renta ya excedió y ya nosotros parece que ya no lo aguantamos. Ya sea el 1 o el 2% de aumento es ya demasiado alto. Y para mí, pues, fuera bueno la ley, pues, de que al menos se obtuvieran unos 5 años sin aumento de renta para poder ayudar bastante a nosotros que somos renteros de las casas. Y eso sería excelente para todos nosotros. Y otra de importancia que sería bueno es que los mismos dueños de casa se encargaran de matar toda pestilencia que hay, por ejemplo, las ratas y cucarachas y animales, toda pestilencia que hay en las casas viejas, humedades y todo, que el dueño de la casa también tomara responsabilidad y mantener control. Y eso sería todo para mí. Y gracias, Siri, por escuchar. Gracias a nuestra comunidad y a todos. Saludos.
Thank you. Next, we have Hallie. You should be able to speak.
Hi there, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you so much. Hi there, my name is Haley. I live in Ward 3. I would like to voice my support for strong rent control in Somerville. I want to take a moment to speak for those of us who don't have the opportunity or the privilege to shop around for a good landlord for a commodity that should be a right. I've moved 8 times in 11 years, largely because of my inability to pay an increase in rent. I'm a great tenant. And so the reason I had to move was because my landlords were increasing my rent to an amount that I couldn't afford. For example, my roommate's building was sold in the middle of his lease because a commercial landlord purchased the building, and that's how he ended up living with me. I want to echo my support for a rent stabilization policy that is stronger than Boston's, with rent increases capped at either 5% or CPI or at CPI or lower. I want to also echo my support for just cause eviction and vacancy controls, which are essential to protect tenants from landlords who will kick them out in order to increase the rent. Again, housing is not a commodity. I'm a law student. I recently got engaged. My fiance and I love this city and are deeply enmeshed in the small business and restaurant community. As we think about our future together, we will not be able to stay here long term. Honestly, with the way our community has changed with the rapid development by commercial landlords and luxury housing, we don't know if we want to stay. Artists, community activists, teachers, people with a diversity of backgrounds, experiences, and incomes are the lifeblood of this city. If they can't afford to live here, there will be nothing to stay for. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ben L. Ben, you have permission to speak.
Hey guys, bounced around Calvin and Beacon Street properties as a renter, as a tenant, sorry, I guess it's a better way to say it. And I do agree with many of the sentiments echoed here. I also think that one thing we could look to do is try to combat some of the NIMBY policies by potentially looking to have some people expand some of the 3 families in order to prevent overdevelopment, like with some of the flat roof ones, potentially, trying to find ways that we can provide more units, because these policies, while they can be great, they might not do enough to, keep the community the way that it should be, where everyone could be happy and enjoy the time that they've spent here and keep the diverse background. So I think we should also look for ways and potentially look for ways to try and expand without overdeveloping in order to prevent some gentrification, so we can all enjoy the Somerville that we've come to know and love. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Grace L. Grace, you should have permission to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name's Grace Lottie. I rent in Ward 3, I want to urge Somerville to adopt a rent stabilization policy that ensures that everyone, no matter who you are, can call Somerville home. I've lived in Somerville for my entire life. My mother and father both grew up here, and my mother's mother grew up here. My family's roots here go deep, and I am immensely grateful to be able to call Somerville home. And I don't think I'm going to be able to stay. I love this place. I can't really afford it right now. I'm really lucky that my family owns our family home, and I will always have the safety net that I can stay. I'm lucky. But not everyone has that privilege. I'm 22 years old. I love my partner, and we are trying to move in together, and we can't find anywhere here that I can stay. We're gonna, I mean, I don't even know where we're gonna go. We've been looking for months, and we haven't been able to find a single thing. Everything has been insanely unaffordable, and we both work 2 jobs. We've both been working so hard, and I am lucky. I'm really lucky that I can move back in with my parents if I want to, because that will always be stable and safe because they own the home. But not so many people that grown up with don't have that privilege and won't be able to stay in this place that is so wonderful to call a home. I won't be able to build that generational love that my family has been able to culture for this place. And I see I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Shamila.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Srimila, and I'm a tenant in Winter Hill. I strongly believe that Somerville needs a rent stabilization policy that is stronger than Boston's, with rent increases capped at the rate of inflation, with a maximum 5% cap on rent increases or lower. And just because eviction protections, the reason I am why I'm calling for these policies to be included is because Somerville is my home away home that I chose to stay away from my dear families back home. I, along with my husband, moved here for our daughter's medical interventions and all, and for her better future. And I want to raise her in Somerville. The city has my heart. I'm here because there's city like Somerville in this whole United States. This is the city I want to be. Being a full-time mom and my husband working so hard to be able to live in this city. Currently, we make good money to pay our rent, yet we have to come home and worry about being displaced or not having a place to afford in future. I strongly wish to have housing stability and rent control so that we can stay in ease and stay with the hopefulness and work harder for other opportunities and enjoy the blessings of life and having a place that I can call home. I have my family moving to United States because I share so much good about community-based city of Somerville, and they are willing to move here, but I'm not being able to find affordable place for them yet. If only there was a rent control and affordable housing, we could have stayed in same city despite traveling miles apart, yet we would have been, we would be far in matter of this fact. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ellen.
Hi, I am Ellen. I rented in Somerville from 2014 to 2021 with 7 people in a 5-bedroom on Highland Ave, and then 5 people in a 3-bedroom on Medford Street, sort of chasing affordable rent. But eventually my partner and I wanted to start a family and didn't think that we could really do that in Somerville with the instability of renting with a baby, you know, maybe having your landlord sell your property or raise rent as drastically as they're known to do. But we couldn't just afford a 2-bedroom by ourselves. We actually ended up buying a multifamily in Ward 1, East Somerville with friends because of some lucky circumstances and you know, not everyone can do that, but that's the only way that we could afford to stay in Somerville, was buying in bulk. And now we have a 4-month-old, and I've been going to lots of meetups with sort of the moms of Camberville, which are moms from Somerville, Cambridge, Arlington, Medford, all around. And time again, I meet moms who moved out of Somerville when they wanted the stabilization that you know you need to have to in housing to have kids. So I know we have this brand new beautiful high school, but if we want any kids to go there, I don't know what the actual stats are, but it seems like most people having kids now cannot do so in Somerville. It's just, you know, I'm here with my kid now, but if I were to have a second, I would have to leave. So if we want our community to grow and continue for generations, we need rent stabilization. So I'm a landlord in favor of rent stabilization.
That concludes our list of speakers who asked to speak in the chat. I think this goes back to in person. And anybody else who wants to speak from here. We have somebody in the chat who would like to speak. Claudia, you should be able to speak.
Hola, buenas noches a todos. Gracias por esta oportunidad. Realmente sí necesitamos la ley para estabilizar la renta en todas las familias. Yo vivo acá en Somerville y he tenido desafortunadamente ver cómo familias han tenido que irse de acá, de esta ciudad. Amistades mías, amistades de mis niñas que están creciendo acá han tenido que salir de esta ciudad porque no han podido mantener la renta. Es muy injusto que siga pasando esto porque queremos estabilidad para nuestros niños. Queremos estabilidad en nuestras familias y no estamos teniendo el apoyo que necesitamos, y no es justo, porque venimos a tratar de darles lo mejor que podemos a nuestros niños, especialmente la comunidad inmigrante que viene de otros países y quieren dar lo mejor de sí para mantener a los que están acá y seguir ayudando a los que están en nuestros hogares, en nuestros países también. Nos están haciendo pedazos con estos incrementos que hacen injustificados en las rentas y solo queremos lo mejor para nuestros niños y nosotros mismos. Necesitamos ayuda para que deje de estar pasando esto, por favor. Queremos estar bien, queremos ver crecer a nuestros hijos y que los niños de mis amigas yo pueda seguirlos viendo y que mis niñas puedan seguir viendo a esos amiguitos que se han hecho de la escuela y que desafortunadamente de repente han tenido que mudarse por estas circunstancias. Por favor, necesitamos ayuda para que podamos seguir en unión y hacer crecer nuestra comunidad con todos estos beneficios que están para nuestros niños y nuestras familias. Gracias.
Are there any other speakers virtually who are looking to speak? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. Well, that concludes our list of speakers, both in person and virtually. So at this time, we have no other registered or unregistered speakers or other individuals who have identified that they would like to provide testimony. So at this time, we're going to go into an intermission. If you have a desire to speak, provide any additional testimony, and you have provided testimony, please just see someone, if you're in person here at the registration desk. If you're virtual, please just either raise your hand or speak into the chat to identify that you want to provide additional testimony. Otherwise, we will just remain here open until our time expires. Currently, we are set to be here until 9:30. Thank you, everybody. And just a reminder, you can still submit any additional testimony as well through email. If we can have the email placed in the chat for the virtual speakers, if you're in person, you can speak to our registration desk about providing input as well. The email is adtf@somervillema.gov. You can also follow along on the progress of this project on our Summer Voice page. That's voice, VOICE SOMERVILLESOMERVILLEMA.gov/ADTF. You'll be able to get updates there. You can sign up to receive updates from our page as well. You'll have information shared out in multiple languages, and it'll tell you when and how you can provide input along this process. And just to reiterate the process, as Nicole mentioned earlier, this is still just a very preliminary phase of the rent stabilization process. The end result of this process will result in draft legislation language that will be submitted to the administration and the council, and will still require review from those parties. If it is passed at that level, it goes on to the state legislature, who will do a similar scrutiny of the bill until they determine that it passes. At that point, the city receives the enabling authority, but then has to draft the actual ordinance. So at that point, we will draft the ordinance and we will continue to work with the public and engage with the public to finalize the actual ordinance language. So there's a long process for this yet, and there's multiple opportunities for either party, whether you're a property owner or an advocate for property owners, or a renter or tenant, or property owner, or advocate for rather a tenant, to provide input along this process. So thank you very much. Right now, we have no other speakers, so we're just going to have some silence on both channels until we have the speakers identified or time runs out, whichever is first. Thank you, everyone. Looks like we have one speaker looking to provide feedback. I'm going to throw it over to our list moderator for them to call out that name.
Sinead, do you want to go talk now? Yeah, no worries. Sorry to.
Hi. Sorry, I know everyone in here is talking. I was late earlier. My name's Sinead. I'm a tenant in Ward 7 in Somerville. I believe the Somerville renters deserve a rent control policy that is significantly stronger than Boston's, with rent increases capped at either CPI or with the Social Security COLA. Just a few policy points. In order to make a strong policy, it's important that we have vacancy controls, just cause eviction, right to counsel, and the bill should include a 6-month rollback. As I think we all know, this policy is going to have a difficult time getting through the State House, so I urge the committee and the mayor to listen to everyone who has bravely spoken tonight, and please take on some political courage to not placate to the developers and the legislators. The rental increase in Somerville have completely destabilized our community, and the tenants of the city deserve a rent control policy that works for all of us. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. My name is Katie McCann, and I'm a community organizer at City Life Vida Urbana in Boston. And I'm here to testify in support of strong rent control that is at least as strong as the State House bill and act enabling cities and towns to stabilize rents and protect tenants with rent increases capped at a maximum of 5% and capped based on CPI, a ban on no-fault evictions, and a 5-year exemption on new construction. City Life Vida Urbana fights for collective bargaining agreements for tenant associations, usually with a maximum of 3% rent increases each year, which is affordable to working class families and makes it possible for them to stay in their homes. Recently, I was the lead organizer working with a tenant association in Malden, which after 2 years of organizing and 6 months of negotiations, won a strong collective bargaining agreement with a maximum of 3% rent increases over 5 years in 3 buildings owned by a large corporate landlord. This was a major victory that created housing stability for many families, but less than a year later, we had to begin organizing against $900 rent increases by the same owner in many buildings the company owns. And this issue is the same in Somerville. We are seeing and organizing against this exact same pattern across Boston as well, and CAS is organizing against the same issue in Somerville. This example shows so clearly why strong rent control policies are needed in order to stop mass displacement. We will continue to fight for affordable and fair contracts at a building level, but we urgently need public officials at city and state levels to take action to stop this rapidly worsening level of displacement at a larger scale that it's needed, especially as evictions in court are reaching pre-pandemic levels and no-fault evictions have more than doubled. Public health research shows that evictions and the threat of eviction have a serious negative impact on physical and mental health. I see that every day in my work as an organizer with families facing eviction as well. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated both the number of people at risk of eviction and worsened the health impacts of displacement, including the spread of COVID-19 and increasing morbidity and mortality from COVID-19. Evictions have lasting negative health outcomes, both in the short term and in the long term. The physical and mental health impact of displacement disproportionately affects communities of color. Evictions and their health impacts widen racial and socioeconomic health disparities. Displacement is a racial justice issue and a public health issue, which is why we urgently need the strongest rent control possible in the city of Somerville, with a maximum cap of 5% rent increases and a ban on all no-fault evictions. Thank you so much.
Test, test. Test, test. Testing. Testing, testing, testing.
We can hear you.
Oh, it says battery low. Testing, testing. Okay, just this one? Okay. Okay, the time is now 9:30. We will now close out our testimony period. If you have any additional comments that you wanted to provide to us, please do so by visiting our page on Somerville Voice. It is voice.somervillema.gov/ADTF. You can see the progress of our project there and options for how to submit your feedback to us. At this time, I want to thank all the interpreters for their service and giving us the ability to have language access to individuals that need it. Thank you for everyone for making time to come out. And thank you to all the staff that helped us in moderating this discussion, and a good night. Thank you.